You don't have a bad memory, you have a bad method. You sit there with the book open, you read a page, maybe two, you nod along like it makes sense. It does make sense. That's the trap. It feels familiar, so you assume it's stored somewhere permanent. Then a week later, it's gone. Not fuzzy, gone. So you reread it, again and again. You highlight more aggressively this time, like neon ink will force your brain to care. It won't. Look, rereading feels productive because it's smooth. Your brain recognizes the sentences. Recognition feels like mastery. It isn't. It's exposure. Big difference. In 2011, Henry Roediger and Jeffrey Karpicki ran a study on this. College students read a passage. One group reread it 4 times, another group read it once and then tested themselves on it 3 times. A week later, the self-testing group remembered about 50% more. The rereaders? They felt more confident. They performed worse. That's you. You're choosing comfort over friction, and memory doesn't grow in comfort. Let's break down why your current approach fails. Not vaguely, mechanically. When you reread, you're feeding information into short-term memory. It sits there briefly, like groceries on the kitchen counter. If you keep looking at them, they're still there. Step away for a few days, they're gone. You never moved them into storage. Your brain stores long-term memory through retrieval, not exposure, retrieval. Actually, that's not quite right. Exposure matters at the start. You have to see something at least once. But after that, storage depends on pulling it back out, not stuffing more in. Japanese students understand this early, not because they're genetically different, because the system trains them differently. In Japan, students constantly practice small quizzes, daily, weekly, low stakes, high frequency. It's built into the rhythm of school. They don't wait for one big exam. They retrieve information over and over in spaced intervals. There's a term for this, effortful recall. It feels harder. That's the point. Robert Bjork, a psychologist at UCLA, calls these desirable difficulties. When learning feels slightly harder, retention improves. Not because struggle is magical, but because the brain tags effort as important. If it costs energy to retrieve, it must matter. So the first shift is simple. After you read something once, close the book. Close it. And write down everything you remember. Don't peek. Don't check. Just dump it out. It will feel uncomfortable. You'll realize how little you retained. Good. That discomfort is diagnostic. It shows you the gaps. Then you open the book and compare. What did you miss? What did you distort? That comparison phase is where correction happens. Your brain updates the file. Karpicki did another experiment in 2008. Students who repeatedly tested themselves remembered nearly 80% of the material a week later. Students who kept studying without testing remembered closer to 40%, double the retention, just by forcing recall. That's step 1. Retrieve before you review. Most people reverse it. They review, and maybe test at the end. Too late. Now, second shift. Spacing. You cram because it feels urgent. Everything in one night, 4 hours straight, and sure, you might survive the test. But Hermann Ebbinghaus mapped forgetting in the 1800s. The forgetting curve drops sharply within 24 hours. Without review, you lose the majority of new information almost immediately. But when you revisit material at increasing intervals, the curve flattens. 1 day later, 3 days later, a week later. Each time you retrieve it, the memory strengthens. Japanese classrooms often schedule cumulative reviews. Old material keeps coming back. Not randomly, intentionally. You don't need a complicated app. You need a calendar. Day 1, learn and retrieve. Day 2, quick self-test. Day 4 or 5, another retrieval. Next week, again. Short sessions, 10 minutes, not marathon study blocks. Listen, this part matters. Spacing only works if you struggle a bit. If you glance at notes before testing yourself, you dilute the effect. The power comes from trying and almost failing. That almost is where memory gets wired deeper. There's neuroscience behind this. When you retrieve a memory, you reactivate the neural pathway that stores it. That pathway becomes temporarily unstable, then reconsolidates stronger. It's like reopening a document, editing it, and saving it again with thicker ink. I'm glossing over some nuance here, but the basic mechanism is solid. Retrieval strengthens connections between neurons in the hippocampus and cortex. Repetition through exposure alone doesn't do that as effectively. Third shift, Compression. Japanese students summarize aggressively, not copying, compressing. After learning a chapter, they reduce it to key points in their own words. Then later, they compress it again, smaller, tighter. You're probably writing too much. Long notes feel serious. They're inefficient. When you force yourself to explain something in fewer sentences, you clarify it. If you can't compress it, you don't understand it. Actually, let me rephrase that. You might understand parts of it, but the structure isn't clear in your head yet. Compression exposes structural confusion. There's a study by Michelin Chi from 1994. Students who explained concepts in their own words while studying physics problems performed significantly better on transfer tests than those who just reread solutions. Self-explanation works because it forces integration. You connect ideas instead of stacking them. So, after retrieval and spacing, you compress. Take a topic, explain it aloud like you're teaching someone younger than you. No jargon. If you get stuck, that's the weak link. Fix it. Then, write a version that fits on half a page. Later, shrink it to a few bullet points. Later, maybe a single paragraph. You're building layers of understanding. Now, here's where most people mess up. They treat these as separate techniques: testing, spacing, summarizing. They try one for a week, then drop it because it feels slower than rereading. It is slower, at first. You already know this. Rereading feels efficient because it's easy. This feels inefficient because it exposes ignorance. You don't like seeing the gaps, so you avoid it. Look, I'm not entirely sure why we're so attached to comfort in studying. Ego, maybe. Fear of looking stupid, even to ourselves. But the pattern's clear. The students who tolerate friction remember more. There's a piece of this people miss. Memory isn't about storage capacity. It's about reconstruction. Every time you recall something, you rebuild it. If you rebuild it often, it gets stronger and more organized. If you don't, it decays. So, the method isn't magic, it's mechanical. Learn briefly, retrieve without looking, space the retrieval, compress and teach it back. Do that consistently and your bad memory disappears. Sounds simple. It is. Doesn't mean it's easy. You'll want to go back to highlighting. You'll feel behind when others are still reading and you're sitting there with a closed book trying to remember. Stay with it, because a week later, when they're blank and you're not, you'll realize something uncomfortable. You never had a memory problem. You had a comfort problem.